Hello, my name is Sarah Salem. In this video, we're going to talk about muscle memory. The contents which we're going to explain are what is muscle memory and how it works, the relation of muscle memory with the brain, how long does muscle memory stay and how long does it take to achieve it, and how to use muscle memory in our advantage. Muscle memory is the act of committing a specific motor task into memory through repetition, or is to be able to perform a physical task with no or little conscious effort. For example, we don't have to think about the way our legs move while we're walking. This kind of memory is not a true memory of the muscle. Our muscles themselves can't actually remember anything, but they're full of neurons attached to the nervous system, to the brain, that play a role in motor learning. Here we have examples that are found in many everyday activities that become automatic and improve with practice, like playing an instrument, lifting weight, signing a signature, or riding a bicycle, typing a text message, or tying our shoelace. So how do we develop muscle memory? First, we have to learn the action, then with persistent training and practicing over and over again, we gain muscle memory. When someone trains consistently and then they take a break, then coming back to where they left off before the break will be much easier than how it was getting there in the first place. It's always difficult and requires much work and time to reach your goal. For example, it takes 6 months to build some muscle in biceps, and then taking a 3-month break from training, so they end up losing most of that muscle. But because of muscle memory, if they start training again, it only takes 2 months to get back to where they were before. So the second time, the muscles are able to grow much faster, and also the brain remembers the movements that was used to be done to build muscle before the break. So this explains that it's always easier to regain muscles that's lost than trying to build a new muscle. Muscle cells contain multiple nuclei, which are called myonuclei. They are responsible for construction of new muscle proteins, increases muscle fiber size, and makes it stronger. To continue getting bigger, a muscle cell must add more myonuclei. Muscle cells can't produce myonuclei themselves, but they must take them from stem cell. The stem cell that's involved in muscle growth are called satellite cells. They are needed to help heal and repair damaged muscle fibers, so they attach themselves to damaged muscle fibers and donate their nuclei. So as the satellite cell fuses with the nuclei, it increases the cell's potential for more size and strength. So as the muscle grows, it undergoes hypertrophy, in which the muscle size increases and the muscle gets stronger. The more someone trains, the more myonuclei the muscle cells accumulate, and this makes them more resistant to muscle damage. And these myonuclei stays here forever, it won't get lost. So as a person stops training, the muscle undergoes atrophy, in which the muscle loses its strength and shrinks in size because protein degradation rate exceeds protein synthesis rate. After a while, when the person goes back to training, it reaches hypertrophy in a shorter period of time, so this is muscle memory. It allows to regain muscle size and strength quicker. You don't have to go through all of these to reach this, because the muscle memory is stored, so you can reach here in a shorter period of time.
دوایەوەی زانیمان مەسڵ میمۆری چییە؟ پرسیارێک دێتە ئاراوە، ئەویش دەستەواژەی مەسڵ میمۆری چ واتایەک دەگەینێت؟ ئەگەر بێت و دەستەواژەکەشی بکەینەوە، بە واتایەوە دەگەینێت کە میمۆریەکە لەناو مەسڵ ستۆرج دەبێت. which is actually not. لەبەرەوەی ئەگەر تەماشای ستراکچەری مەسڵ بکەین، ئەوە دەبینین لە کۆمەڵێک فایبەر پێکاتۆتەوە کە ئیشیان کۆنتراکشن و ریلاکسیشن کردنە. هیچ شوێنێکی وا نابیننەوە کە تیادا ئەو میمۆریانە تیادا ستۆرج بکەین. لە ڕاستیدا ئەو میمۆریانانە لە برین ستۆرج دەبێت. کاتێککە لە برین ستۆرج دەبێت ئەوە دەتوانن هەر برینیشە کۆنتترۆلی مەسڵەکان دەکات کە چ بکات یان چ نەکات. لێرانە پرسیارێکی دیکەەوە دێتەوە ئاراوە، ئایا چ پارتێکی برین ئەو مەسڵ میمۆریانە تیادا ستۆرج دەبی یان ئەسۆسییتە لەگەر مەسڵ میمۆری. لە کاتی فێربوونی شتێکی نوێم وەکو سکیل یا موڤمنت ئەوە هەندێک ئێریاکانی ناو برین ئەکتیڤیشن دەبیت. لەگەر ئەو ئەکتیڤیشن بوونە کۆنێکشن لە مابینی ئەو ئێریانە زیاد دەکات. ئەو ئێریانەش بریتین لە mainly premotor cortex, which lies just in front of the primary motor cortex, and the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. Ishi motor cortex, okay, is to control voluntary movement. Ishi cerebellum to adjust this voluntary movement based on the sensory input, such as visual input. هەروەها ishi basal ganglia is activate the bee during the initial movement. So, initiation and control of the activity is still mediated by the motor cortex, but the completion is mediated by the cerebellum. So, since cerebellum have more neurons, activation كي ويندر زياتر دبيت. باسی ئەوشمان کرد کۆنێکشن لە مابینی مۆتۆر کۆرتێکسەکە و سێربڵەم زۆر دەبیت. ئەوە کاتێک کە ئەو کۆنێکشنە disrupt دەبیت ئەوە memory activate is disrupted. So, in conclusion, زۆر دووبارەکردنەوەی ئاکشنەکان وەی لێ دەکەم کە ئیشەکەمان ئۆفەرتلێس بیت و هەروەها بە ئۆتۆماتیک سکیل حیساب بکرێ. لێرەدا ئاکتیڤیشنی پریمۆتۆر کۆرتێکسەکە و بەیزڵ گەنگلیاکە دیکریز دەبیت.
Changes when acquiring muscle memory. When learning a new physical activity, the structure of your brain changes. As you come to master a skill, different portions of your brain begin to build connections via white matter. For example, in an MRI scan taken by people who are trying to learn to juggle, researchers have discovered that after the training there is an increase in the white matter connections between the regions of the brain which are responsible for vision and the regions which are responsible for making movement. So in other words, the brain began to change itself to develop a greater eye-to-hand coordination. This happens across the board whenever you learn a new skill. Your brain figures out which section of your brain needs to communicate more closely and does what it can to facilitate that by building more pathways between them. These skills tend to stay with you long after you have learned them. For example, riding a bike is the most common, or playing an instrument. However, this is not the only part of your brain that changes when you learn a new skill. Gray matter, which is responsible for actually processing, also begins to grow in the conjunctions with learning a task. In other studies, it has shown that after practicing, there is an increase in gray matter parts of the brain. Besides the brain, muscle also tends to change. As you practice an activity, your body begins to grow stronger in the places it needs to maximize success. You naturally put on muscle in the most used area. This happens because the body promotes increase in growth of the muscle cell in the region. Once the person stops training, the newly muscle cells do not disappear, but they tend to shrink, also known as atrophy. But once the person starts training again, the cell returns back to normal, hypertrophy. Improving or achieving muscle memory. Achieving a new skill isn't easy. Studies say that it can take up to 10,000 hours to master a skill. Of course, the more you regularly do an activity, the stronger the brain-muscle connection becomes. There are many ways to gain muscle memory, like first, of course, practice. The more you practice, the better this skill becomes. Second, learn slowly. Rushing things can lead to mistakes in your activity, which can lead to the next point. So third, muscle memory doesn't discriminate between good and bad habits. Muscle memory or muscles remember mistakes in the exact way they remember correct technique. So be sure to get it right. When you repeat mistakes again and again, you build a muscle memory for those mistakes, which can make it even harder to overcome later. Fourth, change your mindset about practice. Don't let it become like a daily chore. It will get boring. So in that case, find another way to maintain enjoyment and ways to challenge yourself. And fifth, be patient. Building muscle memory is a process that demands patience. The more you try to rush the process, the greater your chances are that bad habits and frustration will set in. How long does muscle memory stay? Muscle memory is typical for life, whether it's a simple activity or a complex one. For example, simple activity, if you learn to ride a bicycle or drive a car, you will never forget. A complex one, it's like dancing, for example, ballet, or learning how to play an instrument. They will also stick up there for life. But whether it's a simple activity or complex one, regaining muscle memory is possible by practicing again and improving the skill. So yeah, but muscle memory is really something amazing.
Hey, what's up guys, I'm Miss Rahimat. In this video I'll be talking about how muscle memory actually works when we learn things and the neuroscience behind it. First of all, I would like to credit the channel Halo Neuroscience for I got the majority of my references there. So, when it comes to learning, what's the most efficient way of learning? It was found that people in general retain only 10% of what they have learned through reading, and only 20% through hearing and 30% through seeing it themselves. But you retain almost 90% of the information you get if you get involved in the act of it, so doing it yourself. And also note that muscle memory lives in the brain, not in the muscle. So when it comes to learning to ride a bike, it is like an exercise in episodic memory. You can know how to ride a bike without being able to explain how you're doing it. Biking is an unusual case because there seems to be a movement in which you finally understand it, but learning to do anything physical involves this kind of memory. So it feels to us as if that memory is stored in our muscles, as if they're remembering how to perform an action without us really being aware of it. But the reality is that the activity is happening in our brain. So neurons inside your muscles also play a role as well, of course, but the pattern of the activity that helps you perform the same action over and over, it happens in your brain. Okay? So, to master any skill, there's this thumbnail rule of 10,000 hours that was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. That is, if you work for 3 hours per day on enhancing a skill, you will master it throughout 9 to 10 years, but of course that depends. It does not apply on everyone. It's not the same for everyone. So, next thing is how to take advantage of muscle memory in teaching and learning. Now, suppose that you're a science teacher. If you were to only explain the subject casually for the students, they're more likely to forget it. But if you involve 3D models in explaining and showing demonstrations, they're more likely to remember it. Now, if you let the students engage in the activity and perform the experiments themselves, or even make them explain it on a 3D model or demonstration, then that's the most effective way where your students will learn most out of your class. Now, I'm an artist, so I would like to explain the muscle memory neuroscience through my art journey. So, when you learn any skill, what happens in our brain? In order to learn a skill, you need to create and strengthen pathways in your brain. And this happens by activating specific neural pathways for each and every practice. These are functional pathways, neurons working together to achieve a goal. So, when it was my first time learning how to draw, my brain was like a forest full of trees with no clear pathway between point A and point B. As I began to practice more, I created a trail through the forest. Now I improved a bit, but not enough to master it because that's new and the pathway isn't very clear. So in order to improve more, I need to refine and strengthen the drawing pathway in my brain. And the way to do so is through more practice. Now, practice gradually widens the trail through the trees, forming a path from point A to point B. Now, after every practice, you don't need to think through all the lines and the shades because the pathway gets stronger after every practice. And the paved road that you have created connecting point A to point B allows information to be transmitted at a faster rate. So now you're almost 70% there and you don't think through every step now. Eventually, with enough practice, what started as a trial has become a full-blown highway. Now you're a master, nailing every sketch, and drawing becomes second nature. Now, scientists call this plasticity, and it's your brain's innate ability to create and strengthen connections between neurons. These connections are the paths through the forest. So, one last thing that I would like to talk about is what blocks your muscle memory is fear. So, it's not just practice that makes you improve your muscle memory, but also your willpower. So, if you keep on telling yourself, I cannot do this, I'm afraid to do this, then no matter how much you practice, you won't actually see satisfying results. But if you make yourself believe that I can do this and I will do this, then that's how it helps you to get over your fear and improves your muscle memory. And that's all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video beneficial, and bye.